friends, welcome back to my channel. Today I have my January wrap up for you. I read 18 books in January. I don't know how. I'm not doing anything, that's how. I personally find wrap ups a little boring. I watch them because I like to know what people are reading. But just the format, and I know like other booktubers have tried to get away from like the format of the wrap up and they have really creative ideas, but I'm kind of brainstorming things that I personally would like to replace a wrap up with. So let me know, do you like wrap ups? Is this interesting to you? Do you really want to be here for a half hour while I talk about all the books I read? I don't know. And I also think I'm going to timestamp the books that I'm talking about. So if I start talking about a book that you're not interested in, you can kind of skip to hear me talk about one that you are interested in. So I have quite the stack to show you. So we're just gonna get into it. The first book I read, and I'm so happy I read this book first in January. So happy. I don't actually have the book, but I do have the dust jacket. The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. If you haven't heard everyone and their mother talk about this already, you are now. I gave this 5 stars. It's like a warm, magical story about a man who works for the capitalist society, goes to investigate an orphanage that may or may not have dangerous children that could bring about the end of the world, and he's a caseworker and he has to figure out if that's true or not. Do they close the orphanage? It is a warm hug. It is amazing. I loved it. The writing was fantastic. I loved the development of the characters. I cried. I laughed. And obviously I've now lent it out to my sister. Everyone I know, I have gotten to read this book at this point because it is so fantastic. I'm so glad I started the year off with this book. 5 out of 5 stars, which by the way, there's quite a few 5 out of 5 stars in here. I just know myself so well. The next book I read is Black Futures by Jenna Wortham and Kimberly Drew. This is a large zine type of book that has art, music, poetry, interviews, essays, basically about the Black experience in America and Black futures. It's divided up into parts so that everything kind of falls under one specific theme. So there's power, Black Lives Matter, joy, legacy, Black is beautiful. I really found that it addressed Black people. It wasn't for a white person like me to learn about Black people and learn about racial injustice. It was just like a book, a zine for and about and by Black people. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was really well done. It was really well put together. The next book I read is Lore by Alexandra Bracken. This I gave a 3.5 out of 5 stars. This takes place in New York, present day New York. There's this whole other world going on with the Greek gods and goddesses and how they fell. And now every 7 years, there's this big week, 9-day long battle where their descendants, I believe, have the chance to kill the gods in their non-magical forms and take them over. And it's about a girl whose life was destroyed by this world. And now, 7 years later, it's happening again. And she's run away from it, and suddenly she gets pulled back into it for a very specific reason. Teenage Emily would love this book. It's really action-packed. There's always something happening. There's like a love story in there, intrigue, chosen one, the whole 9 yards. 24-year-old Emily just thought it was okay. I thought it was lacking some character development. There's some twists in it that I just didn't see made sense. And I had an issue with the diversity. It takes place in present day New York, so like where are all the people of color? And I had an issue with the dynamics between the characters. The main character is a girl, and she literally has no girlfriends. Like, and that, for some reason, that is a point that really bothered me when I first finished it. Because a couple of times, and this might be a bit of a spoiler, a couple of times we meet other girls the same age as the main character, her name's Lore, and like they just don't like each other, or they betray each other, and it's like, come on, get it together. So the next book I checked it out from the library. This is The Poison Eaters by Holly Black, which is her collection of short stories. It was published quite a while ago. It was published back in 2010. So it was after the Modern Fairy series, but before the Elfame series. And I really enjoyed these short stories. I ended up giving these a 3.5 star as well. They were very weird, which I really liked. And I really liked the ones that felt like fairy stories, not fairy tales, but like fairy stories, like fae stories, because they were super weird and creepy. And some of them didn't have like a happy ending, which is something that I actually really enjoy about like fae tales and stuff. It's a short story collection. I love some stories. I didn't like some stories. So I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next two books I read are Son of a Trickster and Trickster Drift by Eden Robinson, the first and second in the Trickster series. I reread this. This is the first time I reread it. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars like I did the first time. This one is about a boy named Jared and his life growing up in BC on an indigenous reservation. It also has this magical twist. I don't want to call it a magical twist because like the magical twist is the trickster stories of the Haisla and Hetsuk First Nations, of which Eden Robinson is a part of. So I don't really want to call it magical because it's like part of their culture. It's a lot about family dynamic and Jared and his loyalty to his family, trauma and decolonization, and intergenerational trauma. I found this really interesting as he's like navigating his community and the people around him. And it's also kind of about him eventually trying to get sober, and the way that the community around him and his friends and family view that. So the reason I read that was to move on to the second book. And I don't know what I was gonna say. The reason I read that was because I wanted to read the second book, Trickster Drift. This came out a couple years ago and I just haven't gotten around to reading it yet. And I couldn't remember a lot about the first book, so I like speed read the first book in like a day, and then I went on to read this, and I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars as well. I loved it. I thought it was so good. I actually loved it more than the first. So I'm looking at my notes. What I found really interesting about this one was in the first one, we see Jared and his connection to his family and his community and his friends, and how his loyalty can get him in trouble sometimes. And how he goes out of his way to be so loyal to everyone around him. And in this one, it's almost the opposite. I don't want to spoil anything. It's basically him meeting new family members and coming to figure out how he can trust them. Because in the past, when he's put so much loyalty into his relationship with someone, it can get him in trouble and it can really crumble his relationships. So now this second book is kind of about the trust that he has to put into the people around him and trying to figure out if they're genuinely loyal to him or not. Because in this one, he really needs the help. So I really liked this one. I'm dying to read the third book. It comes out at the beginning of March. I'm so excited to read it. I gave these both a 5 out of 5 star. Next couple books I read, I actually read in a reading vlog, so I'm not going to talk too much about them, mostly because I don't want this video to be so long. So if you want to hear more about these books, you can check out my reading vlog. But the first is Policing Black Lives by Robin Maynard. This is a nonfiction book about the history of Black people in Canada and their relationship to the police system. So it's about slavery, it's about criminalization, all of that. It even touches on like policing in different institutions like schools. I learned a lot from this. What I did is just like underline a bunch of stuff, like names, events that I didn't know about. I learned a lot from this book, and I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars, and I think every white Canadian should read that book. I also read Across the Green Grass Fields by Shauna McGuire. Again, I talked a lot about it in my reading vlog, but I did give this a 5 out of 5 stars as well. I know this has been getting mixed reviews, but I loved this. I thought it was a great setup to kind of another point in the series that people can start from if they don't want to start from Every Heart a Doorway. This is perfect to start from. This is just like a whimsical book about a girl finding a world that she feels she belongs in, but it's also about like institutions and what they might do to make you believe something is a certain way, and their power over the people they rule over, and the ways in which they can isolate communities and make them think different things about each other, all in this teeny tiny little book. It was very good. I highly recommend it. Then I read the Black Tides of Heaven series by Neon Yang, which is the name that they now go by. The first book is The Black Tides of Heaven. It's a silk punk fantasy, which I learned because of this series. And it's a series of novellas. So there's 4 of them, but they're connected, but they're not necessarily the same story all the way through. So the first book takes place in this world called the Protectorate, which is ruled over by the Protector, and this follows her 2 twins that she basically sells to the monastery. She has lots of other children. She sells her twins to the monastery, and that's where they grow up and they learn to practice tensor magic, which basically calls on like elements and stuff, and we learn more about it throughout the series. In this world as well, we find that all children are born without a gender identity. All children go by they and them until they decide they want to be confirmed as a man or a woman, and it is frowned upon to not pick a man or woman as your confirmed gender. And in this first book, we follow these twins throughout their lives as they grow up and eventually come apart from each other. This mostly follows Akia, who is struggling with their gender identity and kind of where they belong, and their relationship with their eventual, she confirms as a woman, their sister, and how she is a prophet. She has dreams that come true. So it's also about the Protector wanting to control their sister. And this one I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. The Red Threads of Fortune I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. This follows Makoya, Akia's sister, after the events of the first book, after something really tragic has taken place in her life. And I thought it was just okay. I thought we really, really lacked some character development from Makoya, so it just wasn't my favorite. The next book, The Descent of Monsters, was probably my second favorite in the series. And this one I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. Again, it takes place after the events of the first 2 books, but it follows a completely different character. It follows an investigator after this huge incident has happened at an institution, and it follows her as she tangles her life in with the main characters, trying to figure out what exactly has happened and what exactly was going on at that institute when the incident happened. Then the last book is The Ascent to Godhood, which is kind of a villain origin story about the Protectorate. That's all I can really say about it. I did enjoy seeing a villain origin story from a different perspective from the villain themselves. This follows someone who the Protector was very close to and loved. So I enjoyed seeing it from that perspective, but I did end up giving this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Honestly, I just wished it were longer. It's not even 200 pages. It's barely 100 pages. And I just wish there was a little bit more substance in it. The next book I read, I've been kind of reading on and off for a bit. It's The World of Critical Role by Liz Marsham, who did most of the writing. She did interviews with the rest of the cast of Critical Role to complete this tome. It's a lot of reading, y'all. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna fucking count it, because look at all this reading. I really enjoyed it. I love Critical Role. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars, and I popped a star off because the people that are picking up this book are people who love Critical Role, and if you love Critical Role, you watch Between the Sheets, their interview series. There's a lot of things in here that aren't surprising to a big fan of Critical Role, or even a new big fan of Critical Role like myself. I've been a fan for like maybe a year. I just found it a little bit repetitive if you watch a lot of Critical Role's content, but if you are a big fan and say all you watch is their D&D show, I think you could get a lot out of this, so I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read, I actually buddy read with one of my friends. Hi to Steph if you're watching. We buddy read Girls Burn Brighter by Shobha Rao. This was the most heartbreaking book I have read in a very long time. It follows 2 girls and their life in India, in a small village in India. It follows like basically the abuse that they go through there. It takes place in like modern day, and it's about like the abuse that they go through, the complete lack of respect for them and their bodies. Very triggering, especially for sexual assault and mutilation, how they grow to be really great friends and how they become lost from each other and their search to find each other again. So it takes place throughout small towns and villages in India, and eventually takes place in America as well. The writing, I would definitely read other works from this author because it was so well done. I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. Honestly, I think it was because everything was so awful. There was not an ounce of hope in it, except in like the writing itself. I thought actually that drew a really cool like parallel and juxtaposition between the events taking place and the writing itself and the narrative from these 2 women, and the way that they, if you've read it, you know why it's called Girls Burn Brighter, but the way that they stay hopeful throughout all of this tragedy. Then I read Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. This was so wonderful to read after Girls Burn Brighter. This is about a girl named Chloe Brown and her fibromyalgia and her chronic illness and chronic pain, and her deciding that she needs to get out more. She needs to get a life. So she makes this list of these things that she wants to do, and she moves out of her parents' house and meets the superintendent, who's this like tall, gorgeous redhead boy, and they don't like each other, but eventually she like recruits him to help her with her list, and they start to fall for each other. It's very good. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. It was really great. It was a fun rom-com, and I really liked it. So then, of course, I read Take a Hint, Dani Brown, which is the companion sequel to Get a Life, Chloe Brown. This follows her younger sister, Dani Brown, who is a bisexual icon we stan. I gave this one a 4.5 out of 5 stars, mostly because it had more misunderstandings than I like in my rom-coms. That's definitely my adult rom-com pet peeve, is the misunderstandings. I can't stand it. Follows Dani Brown, who is an academic, and her love interest, who has gone through some tragedy recently and now works as a security guard in the building that she's teaching in. It's very good. You have to read these. If you like any rom-com, adult romance at all, I think you need to read those. This one was a bit of a disappointment. I read Queen of Coin and Whispers by Helen Corcoran. This is currently published under a small Irish press, so I got my copy off of the Book Depository. This is a sapphic YA fantasy of manners, so it's like a historical fantasy. It would be historical fiction, except nothing in it is real, so it's like a historical fantasy. The author calls it a fantasy of manners. It follows the queen and her spy master as they start to fall in love. And doesn't that sound great? Ugh, I didn't like the writing. It's so upsetting. I wanted to love it so much. I had problems with the pacing. I wish it were longer. I wish it were dual. Like, I wish this were 2 books instead of just 1. I thought the characters made weird decisions that didn't make sense with their character development. I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars, and I know what you're thinking. Emily, you didn't like this book. Why don't you rate it lower? Something in my heart makes me think that I'm gonna love one of her other books. Like, if she keeps writing sapphic fantasy, I will read it. Of course I will read it. We're starved for the sapphic fantasy. And I also want, like, like young lesbian girls, teenage girls to read this. I really do, because I think that the relationship itself was really well done, and it was just the writing that I didn't like, and I think that my teenage self wouldn't have cared about the writing either. She just would have liked it the way it was. So that's why I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. And the time it took to talk about all those, the sun has almost set. It's almost set. So we just have one more book to talk about. And I'm so glad I finally read this. I was so scared to read this book because I love this author. Let me just tell you what it is. The Invisible Life of Addie Larue by V.E. Schwab. I love V.E. Schwab very much. So I was scared to read this because I had heard mixed things about it. Obviously, there's a big discussion going on right now about this and his lack of diversity, and I will leave a couple links below if you've already read this book or if you would like to read this book. No spoilers, but they're great videos to watch if you want to hear more about lack of diversity from white authors, from people of color on BookTube, from their perspective. I will leave some video links down below. This is about a girl who makes a deal with the devil, a dark pagan god, sort of, is implied. I think he's done. Nope. You may be about to see me in completely different clothes and probably washed hair and more makeup on, let's be honest. It is the next day. I'm here to finish my January wrap up. I know we were talking about Addie Larue, and I was briefly explaining the synopsis. So it's about a girl, and she's born in France in the 1700s, and she is of age to be married, and she doesn't want that. And she does everything she can to prevent any kind of hold on her independence from happening. But one day, it's not enough, and she is kind of being forced to marry this guy. So she runs away and she starts to pray to any god that will listen. And this like dark shadowy figure shows up, and she basically makes a deal that if she can be free, he can have her soul when she dies. And he mixes it all up, and basically what happens is she's immortal. She lives forever. If she's harmed, it'll heal on its own, all of that. But she is forgotten by everyone she meets. This takes place over 300 years, and we get to, I think it's 2013 or 2014, so like present day, and she meets this man, boy, person who remembers her. This was so good. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. It's about life and anxiety over time moving too quickly, and anxiety over going too soon, not being able to do everything that you want to do. And I felt it so hard. It's like, personally, I feel those anxieties all the time, even as a depressed 20-year-old who some days are better than others. I still feel this like overwhelming anxiety that I'm not going to get to accomplish everything that I want to do before my time is up. And it also follows Addie's relationship with this dark god that she makes this deal with. I thought the ending was perfect. I thought it was so well done. That's the last book I read in January. Overall, it was like a hit and miss kind of month. I've mentioned this before. I think I'm just getting better at knowing what I like and the books that I want to read, and I'm totally comfortable not reading books that are popular, that don't seem interesting to me. I'm gonna insert clip. These are all the books I read in January. Let me know your thoughts if you agree or disagree with anything I said. As usual, I will leave any links that are needed down below for you to check out. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, hit subscribe if you haven't yet. I will see you next time.